Intellectually engaging to think outside the lines with conversation about the nation that never leaves you blind. Take a listen and pay attention. Here is where you find the educational, sensational meeting of the minds. Yeah, it's the meeting of the minds. Meeting of the minds.
Thank you for watching Meeting of the Minds. I'm Selah V, and we are here today to discuss the terrorist acts that have happened in our city. I know that they are not being referred to as terrorist acts in the media, but during this meeting and discussion, we're going to be looking at if it should be called a terrorist attack. I am calling it a terrorist attack, but we'll examine that a little bit more further, more closely. Today with me, I have Master Damon Stith. He is from Austin Warrior Arts, also Guild of the Silent Sword. He is a martial arts teacher, and he also specializes in doing African and Middle Eastern martial arts and restoring the history back on those arts. Thank you for being here with us today. We have Kai with us as well, and she is the glue that kind of holds everything at Meeting of the Minds together behind the scenes so things don't just fall apart at the hinges. And she is here today to make sure that we stay in line. I want to make sure that we respect the family and their wishes and not speak on their behalf. And she is the female energy in this dynamic to make sure that we stay the course on that. I don't want for us to overstep that boundary, and she has such a heart in that area for that. So she will help us walk in that. Also, we have Benjamin with us today. He is from Black Lives Matters Austin, and I'm really glad you're joining us as well today. We have Brother Robert Muhammad from the Nation of Islam. He is also joining us today, and he has been involved and very active after the aftermath of some of the things that have transpired within the community. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Benjamin, I would like for you to start us off a little bit. There was an event at Greater Mount Zion, and during this event, I had the police chief and I believe the mayor came and they spoke a little bit. Can you backtrack and tell us what they said, just a summary of what you remember of what they said transpired from their mouth?
Sure. So Thursday evening at Greater Mount Zion, we had the mayor, the city manager, and the interim police chief address the community. And from what interim police chief Manley went through, he recapped that we have now a third victim from these bombings. The first one was 39-year-old Stephen House. Second was 17-year-old Drayla Mason. And the third is 75-year-old Esperanza Herrera. He said that they're not calling it a race-related hate crime. They're not calling it terrorism, but they're also not ruling that out. They said that they have 300 federal agents involved in the case now from the FBI and the ATF. And there's a $65,000 reward out for information that leads to the capture of this person. 15,000 of that came from our state governor, something that I find extremely disappointing and a pathetic amount of money to offer for the lives of people that have been killed. That breaks down to $7,500 per person that was killed. So he went through a bit more of the information. He said he could not speak on known hate groups in the area because that's an FBI department. That's something that I will be contacting the Southern Poverty Law Center about. He also went through, trying to remember, I posted it on Facebook Live, but something that really bothered me about what he said is that it's not being called a terrorist act. It's not being called a race-based attack. But if that's the case, why do you have 300 federal agents working with you to catch this person? That, to me, says that it is seen as a domestic terrorist act, but they don't want to look at it that way. Another part of what he said about it not being a race-based murder or race-based attack, I don't find that accurate at all. Just from the first incident with Stephen House being murdered, by a bomb left on his doorstep, the initial judgment was that he had done it to himself. So right away, APD's judgment was this person is incompetent and they may have been trying to blow somebody else up, instead of looking at him as an innocent black man who's a victim of a terrorist attack. So there's a lot of discrepancies there. One thing that was valuable that I heard him say was that he apologized for that judgment. However, that does not change the fact that that's the mindset within APD, and these are the people that we pay to protect our community.
Do you know if they were saying, did they clarify if there were names on the packages, or were they able to verify that? Was it possible to know?
They've not said that yet.
Okay.
That's something that he made sure to say that is within the FBI's realm, and so he could not speak on that.
Okay. Before we move on to answer the question of should it be ruled an act of terrorism, does anyone want to comment on anything that's been said so far? Okay. Anything come to mind? Did you think of something?
I think it's important to know that there weren't just 3 people that were injured in that bombing, and that the mother of Jaylen Mason was also injured. And we also need to be mindful that whether or not people are physically injured from that, again, as we build up as to whether or not we identify this as a terrorist act, for those in the community on that street, extended family members, this attack is nothing less than an act of terror. Because, at the end of the day, when I found out what was happening in the city, the first thing I did was call my mother in East Austin and tell her, please do not open anything that's left out on the porch. I had friends and family members calling me from all over the country and Jamaica saying, please tell your daughters, I know they're home during spring break, not to open up any packages that are left outside on the front porch. So if that's not an act of terror, I don't know what is.
So we're moving into classifying it as an act of terror. I know that we spoke a little bit before the show about, if it's a Muslim person that is the suspect, they don't even have details. It's not even a turnaround time of maybe 5 minutes to an hour, and they'll already label it as a terrorist attack before even anything has transpired, right? So, but with this, they're so hesitant on labeling it a terrorist attack. Does everyone at this table agree that it should be labeled as a terrorist attack? Is there anyone who thinks that it should be held off as a?
I believe that, just judging by the nature of the weapon, like you should err on the side of caution. So like if it is a bomb and there's no pattern, it's like you have to assume that this could happen at any point, at any time. It's like, why wouldn't you assume that it's an act of terrorism? Because that's exactly what it's creating in the city. It's creating fear. It's creating terror. It's disrupting the everyday flow of most people's lives. And that's how terrorism as a weapon functions. So err on the side of caution. Don't dumb down your investigation. Don't send that message to the city that if something like this happens, that we're going to not put all of our resources forward to find out who did this. So
I think the reason why they hold back from considering it a terrorist, slapping it on there, is because they firmly want to know that it's politically or racially charged, right? Go ahead.
I mean, I wanted to say that, historically and traditionally, that, as you mentioned, if in fact it is a person of color, if it's a Muslim, then they're quick to label the crime as terrorism, and they'll find a motive that fits into the definition of terrorism.
That's right.
But historically and traditionally, if it is particularly a white male, a Caucasian or European male, that they find ways to disqualify the motive as terrorism. But we were down just a couple of hours ago down on 6th Street talking to some of the people that were enjoying South by Southwest. And one of the questions that I asked everybody that I encountered was, how do you feel? I asked them where they were from, and I asked them, how do you feel with coming into the city and knowing that there were 3 bombs set off in the black and brown community? How has that affected, either your first South by Southwest or your second or more? And, most of them, it didn't affect them as much.
Did they verbally say that?
They verbally said it. And I came to the conclusion after talking to enough people that it is because they're not from here, and so they know that they're going to be confined to downtown. One individual did say that he was kind of concerned and that he was present when there was a stampede last night on 6th Street. And so, but everybody that I talked to that's from the city, that either still lives here or have moved somewhere else, that's coming back for South by Southwest, they are all concerned. I've spoken to artists that are being very cautious, and some of the shows that they would normally go to see, they're staying back from. So it's affecting those of us that not only are homegrown, but some that have lived here and have called Austin home. So I think that this says to me, if they have not labeled it terrorism, then there's some evidence that says that it's probably a European male or a Caucasian. Otherwise, they would have already begun to label, because they have shown that they exercise very little caution when it comes to people of color and labeling such crimes. Or they really just don't have a clue, which I don't believe that, because initially when I was looking into the case, now I'm not a police officer or anything like that, but it was such a coincidence to me that these 3 bombings happened in a close proximity to certain community activists and organizers. That was one thing. I had an individual pull some tax documents after the 3rd one, and he found that there were common links between the Dr. Mason's family. So there are a few theories that are out there. Needless to say, that we are all still very nervous. We are all on edge. And even something as small as putting out our trash by the curb and not leaving the trash can out too much longer than when they pick it up, because you don't know if somebody's going to put something in it or not. So these are precautions that we're taking, and we would urge the FBI and the ATF and the police department to accelerate their investigation so that the citizens can rest assured that we will know what's going on.
Anyone? Words?
Where can I go? So I had a similar experience to Brother Muhammad on Wednesday night when I was down for South by. I was stopping a lot of people, black people, and asking them, are you from here? Where are you from? Do you know about what's happening? We have a community meeting tomorrow on Thursday. Love for you to come if you can. If not, stay tuned online. And every single person that I spoke with knew about it. And just like Brother Muhammad said, I could see it on their face, and they were impacted, and they had feelings about it. So it's something that in that moment reminded me of, I believe it was 3 or 4 years ago, when a motorist was trying to evade police and he drove into a crowd on Red River. And South by Southwest has now changed their security policy based on one person, one act. But in Austin, we have a bomber who has killed 2 people and injured more, but they won't say anything yet. I understand it's early, but in the same time, on Thursday night, Interim Chief Manley said, this could take a month, this could take a week, give us time. And I don't accept that, because if we pay you and you have brought in 300 federal agents, I want a quick turnaround. I don't want to see another person hurt.
And I wanted to add to that, is he mentioned it, and my mind is going back to being down on 6th Street, changing the security operations. I noticed that there was a large number of dump trucks at the intersections, so that vehicles could not pass, and you would have to even walk around as a person. And so now that you've mentioned that incident from a few years ago, it's adding up in my mind as to why I saw all of these dump trucks on nearly every intersection on 6th Street.
That was
So-
my stomach. Oh my gosh, I'm
That's
hungry.
fine. We're
Oh,
hungry. We're hungry for knowledge. We're hungry for answers.
Go ahead.
Going back to the issue of one incident should have been enough for them to sound the alarm. And we do know that once you paint the picture of someone being mentally incompetent, you paint the picture of an isolated event, that the response is going to be less. And the thing that gets me is they have already found similarities in each of these devices, the way that they were created, the signature, and coming from a law enforcement
The
standpoint.
person knows what they're doing.
The person knows what they're doing. But not only that, just Thursday or Friday, I believe it was Friday, they were going to different hardware stores to find out who, if anyone, had purchased within a certain time frame the necessary components to create these, because it's not just a matter of the level of sophistication and what goes into bomb making. I'm not saying that I look up how to make a bomb, but there were components included in these IEDs that essentially had shrapnel of nuts and bolts.
It's
and
not simple to make
it's not simple to
bomb
make
to do
the complexity of the electronic components,
So
to
with
their motion
that
sensor
said,
detector.
you make a very valid point. So I need to know, do you all think that the response on the first one was justified? I had no idea about the first one. And with that type of information that you have to build such a
They
thing,
should have had ATF down here immediately upon the first explosion, and had they created the same level of response to the first instead of waiting until the third, then even if this is one person, if it is a group, if they are intent on creating terror in a community, they will find a way to do it. But it perhaps would have changed the trajectory of their plot.
Right.
And perhaps we could have saved lives, maybe not by preventing them from placing these packages on doorsteps, but by creating community awareness to the fact that if someone sees something sitting out there, it's not a welcome to the neighborhood.
Right.
did they respond as to what took them so long to do that? I know that we came in on the tail end of that.
So they did not, but one thing that I want to bring up as far as exactly what you just said is on that first time, and it was not handled correctly. That reminds me of Nicholas Cruz, who shot up the school in Parkland, Florida. Someone had made the FBI aware of him prior, and the FBI blew it off. They have since taken ownership of that and said, we mishandled that. So we have that same situation here, where somebody was murdered with a bomb left on their doorstep that was, not a simple device. And if you can buy simple items at Home Depot and go construct it at home, you have to learn or know how to do that. In the middle is probably an internet search. And if I can talk about wanting to buy a jacket, a name brand jacket, if I can just talk about it, but then an ad pops up on my phone in my margin, because I know this device listens to me and I know my internet searches are recorded, why can they not connect the dots
Absolutely.
and protect us?
And that's the problem that lies within this first situation, and it clearly states to all of us, or the person that it has open eyes, that this is a common practice of white supremacy and or racism that's firmly embedded in the fabric of law enforcement, that says that black, brown, and poor lives don't mean as much as white and affluent lives. So, he's just a nigga. I don't know if I can say that, but I just did.
It's,
so
it's
y'all can edit
late
it.
night. We're okay. No, right. If we're not gonna edit my stomach growling, we're not editing that.
So it is suicide, or he was trying to make everybody sitting at this table knows black people don't play with explosives. We don't play with bombs. We don't go and look them up. But had they
like firecrackers.
had they investigated this properly, given a warning to the public that this was placed, and warned people to look out for things, then maybe Draylon Mason would still be alive. Then maybe them walking out the house at 4:40 or 6:40 in the morning, they would have said, "Oh, this is not supposed to be here." Or maybe the culprits or the perpetrator would have said, "Oh, they're on my trail, so I can't." Maybe if they had gone to Home Depots after, this individual was killed. So there's a lot of missteps, and they have to be held accountable for that, because I believe that these other two incidents wouldn't have happened, and that is, to me, a clear case of they renewed or revisited the study of the Kerner Commission that was commissioned in the late 60s to see why all of these riots was going on in the country, and they came back with a report that you could have given any one of us money, and we didn't have to go and do a long projected study. We could have told you that there are two Americas, one black, one white, separate and unequal. And so that mindset is firmly embedded, in the construct of law enforcement and other agencies of the country, and we have to call a spade and just call it like it is. Otherwise, we will never put the proper attention and the proper energy towards the injustice. So this is just another thing in the long line of injustices, And I talked to two of the family members, and I asked about his mother and her condition, and so she has a long way to go to come back. And she may never be, she's not going to ever be the same person again, but she may never get back to a normal level of, psychologically, she may not ever be, like she used to be a normal, because you think about this. You have to bury a child, right? You have to go back into your living quarters or to your dwellings. You have to fix that. And every day you go in there, you're going to be reminded of what happened. Then she has to be concerned about her own physical recovery, mental and spiritual recovery. Financially, that's going to take a toll. So there are many different facets of this thing. And the guilt, I was told, the guilt that she's facing right now, is unbearable. So while she's trying to heal physically, while she's trying to heal herself, she has to live, and she has to deal with that guilt and try to overcome and balance that guilt. So there's some tremendous issues that I believe could have been prevented if our doggone police department would do the job that they're supposed to do. But even if they don't, like I said Thursday night, if we as a community do what we're supposed to do in the way of unity, we can force them to do the things that they are supposed to do, because right now they exploit the division lines in our community. We're 8% or less of the population here, and they know that one group wants something, this group wants that, and they continue to exploit. So they always find a way to weasel out of being held accountable. But if we develop a firm wall of unity, like the police departments around the country do, then in that unity is strength, and then we can begin to actually go down and make demands because we'll be united. And so, as I said on Thursday, you can't spell community without unity. So, some of you know me, and I just, this is a fight that we have to fight. We got to be willing to pick this fight up and fight it into the end.
What you just said branched into two ways. I want us to take both roads. One thing that you said is to go make demands, but also at the event at Greater Mount Zion, you said something very powerful about stopping expecting something from the people that are sometimes either doing the oppressing or are not really concerned for the community of color to that degree. So you said that. I want us to explore both those roads, and then there's actually one other road I want us to make a stop off on before we begin to. Gosh, there's so many different things that I want to touch on. I do want to say I know that it's just such a tragedy. Like, it's such a tragedy. While he's talking, I just have goosebumps, all over my arm. I just hope that the people that have. I just hope that their lives weren't lost in vain. What I saw at Greater Mount Zion is what I saw. I saw the Nation of Islam sitting with Christian people, sitting with atheists, sitting with agnostic, sitting with African spiritualists. And I pray that continues on the path that it is, and it is not in vain. And so we are going to go into those two things that you touched on at the event and what you just said now. But I want to backtrack here first, and this is where we're going to backtrack. A while back, like, I'm not saying that, like, we know these things. We know that it's happening on the east side of 35. We know that people of color are being targeted. Now, can't say for sure, but doggone it, man, right? At the end of the day, we can't deny it's affecting people of color, so it is a people of color issue. You don't need anything. It's affecting them.
Statistically,
So it's an issue.
It would be
right.
highly improbable that those kinds of attacks would touch just strictly people of color in this
right
city.
now it is only touching, so it should be dealt with in that manner. And so one thing I remember thinking that you got these $3 million houses being built around here, and you got these beautiful condos, but the black community is not letting up on that area. Historically, that area belongs to the black community. You have Houston-Tillotson, the first university in the city, right up the street, and they're not backing down. You take a mural off, we're putting a mural back up. And so there's a problem there when you're trying to sell a $3 million home and there's black faces in this community on the wall. Is this a black community? So hard to sell a $3 million home to people who don't got $3 million money. So it deters. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder to what level are they going to take it to pushing people out? And I'm not saying that this is that, but I remember that passing through my mind. And I wonder a little bit, like, how are you going to, let's be realistic here and deal with what we've seen, gentrification all across the nation. How are these two things going to coexist with each other? You have the people that have that type of money want their communities looking a certain way. When you go to Philadelphia and you hit the black community or you hit a certain community, you begin to tell where you're at through the murals on the wall. And I guarantee you, in Philly, when you get into the black community, you're not seeing $3 million houses coexisting with black mirrors on the wall. So there's an issue here. And I'm not saying, but I'm just saying. So now that I've said that, I just want us to think about that. And I'm not saying that that's the case, but, this is supposed to be my bearded thinking. I'm really thinking about stuff like that. You want to ad-lib to that? Go for it.
So my very first reaction when I found this out on Monday was first thinking to the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama, and then bombing people on the east side of Austin, where gentrification is pushing us out of that area. And my first thought is, first of several thoughts. First is there an effort to kill the people who won't leave this area because the area is more valuable? Second thought was, the city is going to try to brush this under the rug because you can't sell homes to white people in an area where people are getting killed with bombs, even if it's people that don't look like them. You don't want to move into a city if you're Amazon bringing a headquarters here, if you're a Google, or if you're an Apple. If you're anywhere outside of Austin, you don't want to bring your business to the city when the best hottest place to live is East Side if that place is being bombed by terrorists. So therefore, the city doesn't want to call it what it is because they have to keep the current money happy. They got to keep the new money coming in happy and making those people feel comfortable while making us feel terrified by possible bombs showing up on our doorstep.
So maybe if you call it maybe a hate crime, it leaves enough fear there to impact. I don't know. Yeah. Good insight. Good point.
Yeah, I don't think you have to label it anything for it to have the effect, the
that it's
fear.
having.
I mean, as to like motives, like we could think of tons of motives or overall objectives that this person is trying to achieve. What I would like to just walk away with is like a firm idea of like what we can do to better keep our families and our community safe, even if it's just us doing it. Like, what can we do?
So that's the other road that we were supposed to embark on. So rewinding back to what you had started was that we had said that this is in one place we had all these people in unity, and you want to come up with firm things that we can do to protect that community that's being harmed. So back to you, Bob.
Well, I wanted to comment to your other question and that also. Look, Dr. Chang came out with the study that he did about the effects of gentrification here in the area that we're sitting in right now. A lot of times now it's being referred to as Central Austin and not East Austin anymore. It went from Central East Austin to now Central Austin. So when they say there was a bombing in East Austin, they're not talking about this area anymore. They're talking about east of Springdale. But when you consider the data that he came up with and the growth, the population growth of over 400% of white people moving into this area over a 10-year period, and I think it was like 40-something% drop in Latino population and 60-something% drop in African American population in 10 years. This is engineering. This is not a trend that just happens by itself. This is absolute engineering. So when you having your bearded moment and you're thinking about, hey, look, these are the last strongholds of black and brown communities. Montopolis has long been an area not just known to be black and brown, but particularly brown, for a long time. And that area off of Old Fort Hill, I have an aunt and uncle that live there, but I have classmates, families that live there. One of the, I don't want to say her name, but one of the founders of one of our grassroots organizations that's doing some very good work in the community. Her family members live on that street. So, so there's some engineering that's being done. And is this, because we're not necessarily, we're looking at this thing now, but I can't think of the brother's name, but he is a professor at the University of Texas. I listened to a lecture of his.
Foster?
No,
I'm sorry.
Somebody else. I can't think of his name if I can remember.
Is he in
But-
film?
No,
It's okay.
he
come.
came here in the 70s, and he got himself involved in a program where they talked about making Austin into a tech-tropolis. And they started this program back in the 60s, but he came on board in the 70s. And so the total goal of this program was to create this ecosystem that would incubate and grow and develop tech startups and technological companies. And they wanted the majority of the technology startups to happen here in Austin and to pull that business from the West Coast and other areas and pull it here in Austin. Well, the data that he showed, the last 20 years, most of all of the tech startups have happened right here in the city of Austin. Now, when you do something like that, and you partner with the educational institution, higher learning institution, you partner with the city, and you've got to know that it's almost like invading a country, right? And you go into a country, you bring your corporation in, and maybe somebody says, well, hey, you are you going to bring workers, or are you going to train our workers and you're going to give them jobs? Bottom line is, you knew that it would have an effect on the population and the population growth. And somebody knew within the context of that plan, a 20-year plan, that there would be some migration, right? And so this information may be new to us, but it's not new to everybody. It's engineering. And so so there may be bombings today that are planned to have an effect
Tomorrow.
that lasts 20 years or 25 years, you see. So but what I would like to see is, you know, and I mentioned this Thursday at the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March, Minister Farrakhan asked us to go back and engage in certain activities in our communities that would show that we are taking responsibility for our communities. And when I was growing up as a young man, Booker T. Washington Projects, we knew nearly everybody that lived in that housing project. Everybody knew Miss Johnson. Everybody knew Miss Burdett. Everybody knew the Doyles. Everybody knew the Alexanders. Everybody knew. And at that time, as a little boy, they were still, Borton used to still deliver, put milk on the back porch and juice and stuff like that. And I remember instances where people were running from the police and they ran through my grandmother's apartment, through the front door and out the back door with the police in tow. And so, and they knew whose son that was, and they knew everything. And so if something happened, everybody knew what happened. And so we have lost those days because we're so disconnected, because we're chasing this dollar, we're chasing this American dream, and we're sacrificing our families and our communities. And so we got involved in conflict resolution, and we've done a pretty decent job with that. Even to the effect in Killeen, that this January they reported that this is the first time in 5 years that they had no criminal homicides in the month of January. So we take credit for that because we've been doing work there for most of our mediations have been done there. But the other thing that he asked us to do is to make our community, see if we can stop the killing, then we can start to organize in our communities. Well, there's not a lot of criminal homicides among the black population here. There is, but not in comparison to Killeen.
At all.
So what I would like to see is for us to recruit volunteers to help with neighborhood associations in these various neighborhoods and put together a program that would have individuals that would watch, that would be like a crime watch or the neighborhood association, even the homeowners association, that when we live in these subdivisions, we pay them, you know, and even solicit some security firms to donate time, to donate officers. But we have to open our eyes in our communities. And that community that he lived in is a community largely of elderly or older people. I won't say just elderly or not just seniors, but, you know, middle age and up. You know, they don't have, many of them don't have young children in those neighborhoods. And so.
That who was in?
Draylon Mason. So
Maybe they were being targeted, is what your
well,
theory might be?
I'm saying that they're vulnerable and they don't have any protection, you know. And so
that's really one thing Kai and I were talking about is people beginning to patrol these neighborhoods, you know, and so I think that's exactly a great idea. I know that people end up hesitating, like some groups will like, well, if the Nation of Islam is spearheading it, then a Christian or an atheist might be like, nah, or if a Christian is spearheading it, y'all aren't very much like that to be like, oh no, but you know, because y'all have worked very closely with other organizations. But what I'm saying is that some people feel a hindrance of supporting that when it is a religious denomination association. So what can we do to get around that?
Therein lies the problem. That's we have to mature.
That's right.
We have to understand that the enemy that we face, whether it's ignorance, whether it's racism, whatever it may be, is bigger, and it exhibits more power than our disunity does, and our labeling and being divided over labels. You know, right now the Mason family, they're not seeing any of that stuff. They're not talking about religious denominations. They're not talking about these. All they know is they've lost a life in their family, a young man, and even the older brother was connected and tied to the Mason family. So I believe this is why, and we believe this is why we keep having the problems that we're having, because it's so few of us. And for us, like, let's look at the Asian community. We always talk about getting out to vote, and that's fine. But how much Asian representation do we see in politics?
Not much.
Yet, in every major city, there's a Chinatown.
Yes.
In this city, there's a Chinatown.
Wow, excellent point.
So what are they using? How are they harnessing power? Because they're united. They have a common purpose. They have common goals. They're buying real estate, and they're investing in their community. And when I say their community is becoming where they settle. So wherever they buy land, that becomes their community. And so black, brown, and poor people, we haven't been very good at that. And so we have to mature. And I'm going to tell you,
or when y'all were good at it, it didn't go so well. It went pretty poorly. Like
right.
when communities were established, they were bombed.
So, and let me add this. In the Nation of Islam, and I said this Thursday, that it doesn't matter to us whether, if you don't want to, because we're at the head of organizing something, that's fine. We can take a seat within the organization or the development. So what I was saying Thursday, if you don't like the package that is coming in, change the package. But the bottom line is we have to do something. We can't sit around and expect. We should put pressure on city government. We should put pressure on state officials. We should put pressure on federal government and federal officials. But we don't have the unity and the power and the might of our unity to force them to do what we need them to do. But ultimately, if they do nothing, we're still responsible for us. So we can do what we can do, and what I believe, if we do a good job at what we're supposed to do and secure our community and unite, then we can, that power will be, we can transpose that into political power, like the Asians do.
Asians, even Hebrew Israelites, they had a nation within a nation, right? They judged their own communities, they policed their own communities. Like, I would love to see something like, no one has done a job like the nation. No, you can't argue with this. The discipline of the Nation of Islam when it comes to security and the work that they've put in is miles ahead. Like, I would love to see yourself and someone like Master Damon, people that are specialists in combat training, military training, come together and be able to train, people that are like, let's say right now you're a pastor watching this. I urge you to reach out to these men, or soon they might be reaching out to you, God willing, or something, to reach out to you to say, hey, let's get together on, community defense, like patrolling, like you were mentioning. And so y'all, that would be such a beautiful thing to see. Go ahead.
I want to say a couple things. One is that a great thing that the nation here is doing in Austin is they have the 10,000 Fearless Assembly, or I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but they have a hotline, a phone number that you can call. So if you know of something, if you know of some conflict that's going on, you can call somebody. You don't have to wonder, what do? I know there's a problem. I don't know what to do about it. You can call people who are very highly skilled in defense and training and security. So you do have them as a resource. And as you said, don't let religious affiliations or any political beliefs, don't let that come in the way, because they're not going to come and show up and hit you with a Quran. They're going to come up and bring peace. They're going to come and show up, and they're not going to push their beliefs on anybody. They're just going to push peace. Another thing that I want to make sure to speak on is, you said that there may have been efforts in black, brown, and poor communities that were done poorly, and I want to say that those were not done poorly. Those were done well, but we've had a humongous enemy coming at us. And something here in Austin, there's a 1929 master plan that many of us know about, where lenders and mortgage offices were not giving home loans to black and brown people west of I-35, which plays into the race-related part of this bombing, is that these families may not have even lived on the street they lived on if this city was not designed based on racism. And if we were allowed to live anywhere in Austin, given a mortgage, given jobs that paid what they should, given the education that could lift us out of the communities that we're in, but this city is constructed in such a way based on race. So Black and brown and poor communities have by far put in work and tried to unite and tried to grow, but we've had an opponent the whole way through, and that's the white supremacy that's in this town. Despite the liberal label that likes to be marketed, there is oppression in this city, and we do have an opponent, and every time we try to move forward and try to come together, there's opposition there.
So then I want to discuss the, I wish Fatima was here because she could probably elaborate better. And we keep saying bring peace, peace, peace. I'm a very radical person. I'm a mess. Like, I do affiliate as a Christian, but I wonder to my, like, I'm not that way of saying that, like, I believe there's a time to turn the cheek in wisdom, but then also the Bible that I read has people like David in it, you know, and they were a force to be reckoned with, right? They were taking down Goliath, right? And so all these things are within me. So when we say that, when we're saying like push for peace, like what does that exactly mean? Because I want a line to be drawn in the sand. Like, does that mean that like you attack, like this community is preparing to defend themselves? Yes, or it's like we want peace and let's. What does this mean?
One quick note, and I want to go to the others, but in that example you gave of David, he didn't go and pray away Goliath.
Right.
He took a sword and he cut Goliath's head off. Slingshot. I'm sorry. He used a slingshot to bring him down, and he took a sword and cut the man's head off.
Right.
That was the commitment, and that was the method that he took when the opposition came and said, "I'm gonna, destroy your whole whole country."
So that's the balance that I want to convey in this discussion right here. You want to jump in right there?
Yeah. So peace is a tricky word, and automatically we think that peace is sometimes peaceful.
Right.
And sometimes you have to find peace on the other side of fighting. So I think that the phrasing is kind of ingenious in that it leaves it open. You know what I'm saying? It leaves it open for interpretation, where your idea of peace may be actually working directly with the system and through the system. And I think that there's a need for people who have the ability and the knowledge to make that stuff happen. But then there's stuff on the other side where we may be looking more towards making our communities more independent and doing stuff more on our own. And I think both strategies can work in tandem with each other. But I guess we just have to realize that whichever way you're defining peace, it requires commitment, requires hard work, and it requires consistency. So.
I view it. The Quran says that peace is secured by strength.
Yeah.
And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in the message to the black man, he said that our unity is the cannon, the great cannon that will be fired. So, there's a lot. And he also said that our unity is more powerful than a hydrogen or atomic bomb. And when you think about that, when you think about what happened in Vietnam, or what happened in Japan, actually, when you think about the destruction, but he's talking about construction, and he's equating the power of unity to the opposite of the destruction of atomic and hydrogen bombs. And so I think that when you see, this is why the West wants for certain countries to get rid of and not have the capability to produce certain type of weaponry, because now I got to use a different negotiating method. I can't use my might to crush you under my will. Exactly. So when you strengthen yourself, then now things become a little more peaceful, because now you're not the neighborhood bully anymore. You know that I can fight, and you know that there's a chance that you may lose. So when we unite and we care, my uncle was telling me yesterday before he prayed out on the street, he said, we're encouraging the neighbors to come outside, to watch, to look, see what's going on, make a phone call. They get paid to come in. He says, if you got to call them 1 million times for the police to come out and see what's going on, he said that's what they get paid to do, to respond. So he said, historically you go into other communities and people are watching, they're looking, they're trying to see what you're doing, they're being quote unquote nosy. But in our communities, we're standing in the living room peering through the blinds. Oh, they're out there, they're doing this, that, and the other. No, this is our habitat. This is So I think I'm saying all of that to say that peace is secured by strength. And if you don't exhibit strength, you don't show strength, then there will always be a neighborhood or a bully on the block that will challenge you. And so our communities are vulnerable because we're not united. And so, but when there arises groups of men and women, one of the things that people always say, and I say always like it's been out forever, but about the movie Black Panther is that they loved seeing the women and the men. Some people view it a certain way, but you had military elements of fighters that were feminine and masculine. So, but when you have that, when you're building communities, see the problem with some of the young folks that involve themselves in gang activities, they don't have anything to protect. So they're fighting for a street and a block that they don't own. And they're fighting to control an economy that's not their economy. But if we give them something to protect, we give them something to fight for that is a righteous cause, then maybe we can employ them to do some of what we're talking about, to patrol and to, get rid of some of these elements. But one of the things that really hurt me, and I'll say this, it really hurt me, is for Debbie Russell to make that phone call. Well, she didn't call me on the phone. She sent me a message through Messenger about the concerns of white people and Caucasians, and they were willing to gather people together to support security elements for these hip-hop shows during South by Southwest. That was the first and the last time I heard of anybody mentioning that. None of us. Even now, maybe in some circles that was mentioned, but it hurt me because I feel like other people tend to care more about us than we do, and that's a problem.
Such a mic drop moment. Like, I don't even know where to go.
Well, I do.
Thank you.
Okay.
In speaking on community, because you and I live in the same community, and going back about this engineering of the Techtropolis, we moved here in 1981. When we moved to Austin, we moved to Northwest Austin. We were one of 4 black families. 2 of those black families had children in the same age. Okay, one of the black families had adult children, I believe, and the other was so far away that we didn't really play together. So it was Jamie and I, my best friend still. We are friends to this day. But when we moved here, it was during the time when there was a large influx of people coming in, had Abbott Laboratories, IBM. I can't think because I was still a child, but I just remember who my classmates' parents, worked for. And a lot of those people that were coming in were from the East Coast. We had a lot of people from New York, from Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. And then we also had Pakistani families moving in. As we grew older, then in the early 90s, we had more of an influx of people from California. But the same is told, that you see sections of the population. It was literally not unlike when they moved out west and would create these mining towns full of their workers. And so the culture of that community changed. The priorities of that community changed based on the influx of other people. One thing that my parents did make sure of when we moved here is that we went to church on the east side. And as once my parents knew that my brother and I were going to be okay, and we had established, homes and families of our own, my parents sold what was on the north side and moved to the east side
Wow.
because they felt that it was important to keep black and brown families in historically black and brown neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than see that property go to someone else when they bought, excuse me, the property where they live, it was about 10, 15 years ago. It was right before my daughters were born, so 15 years now. And at that time, they knew that those prices were going to be inflated. The tax bill in that area, from the time my parents purchased their property, within a 5 to 7 year time period, the taxes tripled on the land. They hadn't even built the house on the land. And it reminds me of, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go a long way around
Go for
here,
it.
but it reminds me of conversations that I've had because we just saw a shift. This morning I was reading that Austin is no longer predominantly white.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we have, and the numbers, I see things in my head, but I didn't look at it long enough to hold on to it. But I see that we're still at 5 to 6% for the black community, and I'm not quite sure. I think that the white maybe around 40 something percent, maybe Hispanic 43. I mean, you know, I don't know. I can't get all the numbers right, but needless to say, how they treat gentrification of a black community versus a brown community is also very different.
Mm-hmm.
Because probably some 5 to 7 years ago, I worked with quite a few people at a county government office. And the majority of the people that I worked with, all Hispanic women, most of them related in some way. And they were talking about how developers were coming into their neighborhood and offering their aunt who had lived there for, you know, generations so much money to sell their house. Okay? I didn't see those same numbers being floated in the black community. I didn't see, you know, the houses off of Cesar Chavez were getting, you know, proposals that were far greater than any, if any, that were being floated on.
Sold her house for $30,000 and it got flipped for $3 million.
Right. So that's what I'm saying is, what if, and this is my going a long way around to get here, you know, where my parents are living right now, it was somewhat of a stronghold where they are. The brother that lived next to them before he passed away 2 years ago held on tight to this property. Beautiful home, white picket fence wrapped around. And his children, when he passed, did not realize that he had a one of those upside down mortgages. And so when he passed, they were scrambling because the protections, of course, afforded to those who not only is it your homestead, but you may be a veteran, you may be, you know, you're of a certain age. So the tax breaks were no longer available to them. And they had two choices. They could either pay it off and start paying these crazy, you know, amounts in taxes to keep this property in the family, or they could sell it. And someone swooped in, offered them a little bit here. They sold it just to get rid of the headache, and they've split this man's property into 2 lots.
Yeah.
And when you're talking 2 lots in $1 million home
So
vicinity,
they definitely have strategies for pushing people
it is
out.
a
That's
it is
for
a strategy.
Sure. Very,
So
very.
my concern is this: we cannot just attack this from a, you know, we need to patrol our communities. Education is key. And brother, you know, when you were mentioning the Asian community and how they pull their resources together in order to purchase, you know, property and to loan money or lend money within the community, this is something that historically not that we didn't want to do, but we have not been able to do for whatever reason. So I think that we need to also look at defensive community, not just from a physical standpoint, but also from a fiscal standpoint.
Yeah.
Because had it not been for, this brother telling my parents, hey, 10, 15 years ago, y'all need to really start looking here. If you have the money to invest, don't take that money to Hutto. Don't take that money to Pflugerville. Don't take that money here. And this is where I end up, because this brother and I lived in the same community. This morning, I drove back to Northwest Austin. My girls had a play date. They don't really have play dates anymore, but they went to go get some yogurt, some frozen yogurt in the northwest side of town. And whenever I go to the northwest side of Austin, I really start to feel like I'm choking. It is almost like a PTSD for anyone who is raised in what I call behind enemy lines. The amount of stress that it puts on a person to live outside of their community, outside of it is something that cannot be described. However, I tell you this, whenever I come home, girls wanted ice cream. And I said, you know what? I bought some cones. Let's go pick up some ice cream at the local store. And when I walk into that store of black and brown and poor white people, because trust me, we have far more in common than we have apart. Whenever I am back in my small country town, I feel like I can breathe again. And I try to figure out, what is that? Why do I feel so at ease? Why a smile comes on my face? We don't have all the amenities. We don't have all of the resources. We don't even have a grocery store. But what we have is community. And when you talk about walking outside, where I live, on a little dead-end street where I live, when I come home, my neighbors greet me. The brothers on their grandmother's porch, my neighbor across the street, all her sons, cousins, daughters, everybody knows everyone else. And nothing happens on our street without somebody calling me at work. Kai, I just wanted to let you know.
And Brother Muhammad was saying that,
missing.
He said this same thing, and you're reiterating it right now. I saw you were about to say something at the fiscal mark.
No, I just was kind of chiming in on that because I knew where she was going with that, and I think that for a lot of us, our community is kind of spread out, and that's kind of probably part of, the difficulty in solidifying. So if we're on a battlefield, and if we have these neighborhoods that represent these strongholds, then it's that's where we would we would concentrate our forces there and build from there. So I guess looking at our community, larger community, as being more spread out throughout the city, how do we make that work for us if say that a large amount of Black East Austin is in Pflugerville now? How do we get people that are now living in Pflugerville, living in different parts of the city, kind of focus on this heartland? Is it worth trying to fight for the heartland, or is it better to build a new heartland somewhere else? How can we make that strategy work, considering where we are right now as far as being?
I would say it's worth staying to fight for it, and the reason I say that is because I've seen, I believe it was 2 or 3 officers in Austin indicted for their misconduct and their abuse of people. So I am starting to see a sign of hope in this city. It's not huge, but excuse me, as far as interim chief apologizing to the community, as far as officers being indicted in Austin, one of the officers that abused and assaulted Breon King, he's been fired. I see that the great work of the nation, of Austin Justice Coalition, of Counterbalance ATX, I'm seeing there's a bit of a shift there. And from what we saw in December, where the city council, they did not go ahead with the $82 million police union contract, but they said keep working on it because it's not right yet. I see that there's signs of hope that if we put everything of ourselves into it, we can start to get them to budge in the right direction.
Yeah, like I remember the days when that they would say that 6th Street was like a mecca of like black businesses, and like, you know,
I've heard that.
yeah. I mean, I'm from Austin, so like I was a kid. I don't quite remember those times, and I do remember just kind of subconsciously because I went to I grew up in Northeast Austin, Colony Park area, and they bussed us out to Lucy Reed Elementary School, and they busting kids from like Northwest Austin, and I remember like the culture shock of just being in this place together, and it's like, okay, well, we got these guys together, and it's like it's just whatever. But I just remember this very subconscious, and no one's ever told me like don't go to the West Side, but like I remember feeling like the West Side of Third. Cause I have friends that have since moved to Austin, and they're like they'll ask me questions like, well, do you never been to this place over here in West? I was like, oh no, like what do you? No, it's like I know Austin is like liberal, but like, you know, there's this unspoken thing about, you know, there's certain places you don't go.
Yeah, you know, I have a saying that, you know, Malcolm talked about, and MLK talked about the liberal mindset. You know, liberalism can get it can get black folks killed, because you know, I mentioned Thursday that I never had a problem with the police, but that's because of the training and development we get in the nation. But, you know, when you go outside of certain areas, you start to see, and as an adult, I really didn't see and experience racism for myself until I started working I got a job with the Department of Public Safety. And they warned me before I left the State Department I was with. They said, man, there's some real racism over there. And I went to Traffic Law Enforcement Department, and within the first 2 days, I was supposed to be in training for four weeks. I didn't make it 2 weeks. I said, I got to get out of here before I end up dead or I have to hurt somebody. But it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that and you mentioned, C'est La Vie, that we done some very good things. When we came out of slavery, we built 60 towns. Man. And one of the most notable ones is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. But, it was bombed. Just like the MOVE community was bombed in Philadelphia. But even with fiscal education, when we began to make money as we built those towns and put them in banks, quite often we went to the banks and they said, we don't have your money. So we started taking our money out of banks and putting them under the mattress and putting it in things. Well, they kicked the door in and ransacked the house and take the money. So we developed a psychology of spending that said we need to spend it as soon as we get it, because we never know when they're going to come and take it. So this stuff doesn't come out of a vacuum. There's always a reason why we are doing what we're doing, and it's going to take fiscal education and things like that for us to understand how important it is, because we still have that habit today. As soon as you get it, we're rushing to see how fast we can spend it. But that's something that was developed into a culture, after we understood. And I remember growing up, and my grandmother used to keep money under her mattress, and I couldn't understand why. I thought that's where you supposed to keep it. If she'd have $200 or $300 in her brassiere, it was always something under the mattress, And so I wondered where that came from. But when you start studying aspects of history, you start seeing that stuff. And so there's a major psychological damage that have been done to our community that has to be repaired, and it doesn't repair overnight. And
so it can't be done in their schools, Brother Brian.
So you're doggone right. So there is this question about what do we do right now when there's only this small portion of East Austin that we actually still have, and the majority of us are out in Pflugerville, Hutto, Manor, Del Valley areas. Do we, while the land is cheaper in these areas, firmly plant there, take the rest of what we have in East Austin, connect it to Manor, connect it to Pflugerville, and start purchasing and buying right now, so that 20, 40, 50 years from now, our children's children are not saying, well, we got to move out to what's the next town? Bastrop, or you know, we gotta move.
Yeah.
You know, so
Elgin.
we gotta start thinking like that, because some people see it as selling out, but if you don't have anything to hold on to, you know, you hold on to what you can hold on to. You know, these neighborhoods like Old Fort Hill, Bundy Hill, those areas, we gotta make, because if
Or
if
make
those
areas
owners,
pay. Make them work for us strategically.
And that's-
if those
exactly.
properties are going to go anyway,
exactly,
let's let them go
exactly.
for the highest price, and then what do we do with that?
But see, it's difficult when you have like the Hamiltons. I went to high school with Darwin Hamilton, and they got the little yellow house named after his family, but they sued him and they took that house from him. I'll never forget, I saw him at a car wash one time, and he said, "Man, I was gonna call you, but that beautiful building, the Street Jones building," when he said that they came and they said, "We want to buy your property," he said, "It's not for sale." He said, "I understand it's an eyesore and it's a little shack or whatever, but I'm not selling. It's been in my family since we settled here from slavery. It's the only thing that we have that we can." And so they left. He said they came back a few months later, said, "We want to buy it." He said, "I'm not buying it." He said, "Well, we can take." The city told him we can. I'm sorry. The city said that we can go to our legal department and we can take your property under eminent domain. Then they started rolling out his background and his brother's background. He said, "Well, let me put it on the market and see what it's worth." Now, he had no idea that they was about to build this Street Jones building, right? So, but he said when the streets sold their property, they were the last ones. He said he knew he didn't stand a chance, and so they came and they sued him under eminent domain. He ended up getting some money out the deal so he could go rebuild in Pflugerville, but he still has an issue with that to this day, that the city that he was prideful about being a part of, the city of Austin, sued him for a historical, and that's what they always do. Now you got the city seal up in front of the house. It's called the Hamilton House. It's a historical landmark, but his family no longer owns the property.
Yeah.
So we have to plan for those types of things that are going to come to those areas, that if the property is not passed, you know, from, if nothing else, from family to family. Maybe not family member to family member, but maybe your family goes in and purchases. Maybe we have organizations that go in and purchase them, that repurpose them for maintaining the historical value and you know, the land. So those are many things that we have to think about. And so there are plans that are at play that we know nothing about.
And we are not included.
But there are people sitting downtown that know about them, and there are people that pose as community organizers that know about these plans, that don't say anything about them because they're getting some under the table money, bread, cheddar, chips, whatever you want to call it. And when everything happens, they're just as surprised as we are. No, you know about it, and we got to be very careful about individuals that we allow to be called community leaders, because a lot of times they can
They're
be
voting under the
detrimental.
table for the
Yes,
zoning and stuff like that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to give the community the opportunity to hear these voices. I want to say this. On a panel that Brandon Thornton brought me on, ACC for Black History Month, I was on a panel. I was the only person that was not black. I was a Middle Eastern woman. And, you know, I was kind of, it came up that basically, like, why was I serving, like, the black community at the capacity that I do, or something like this. And I wanted to mention and bring it forth again that it was the black community that first served me. I went to Round Rock High School, and there was a racist thing. It's very well known that it happened when I was in school, but black and Hispanic people were targeted for wearing a certain color. And I just do what I always do. I wrote, like, that's what I do. And I wrote my thoughts on it, and a white young male was like, this is really good, you know, can I make a copy of it? And I said yes. And by lunch, everyone had a a copy of it. And so I experienced some terrible things. I remember the principal telling me I was going to burn in hell for the stuff that I wrote. But the moral of the story is my history, it was the NAACP that came to offer their support. It was the black church that I was pulled into and poured into from the time that I was 18 to the woman that I am today. I'm not going to tell you how old I am because that's unnecessary.
2 years ago.
Yeah, just like 5 minutes ago. And so, and I've been groomed in the black church. It was those connections that got me into Houston-Tillotson University, where I graduated summa cum laude. Let's just go ahead and add that in there, psychology and philosophy. And so when you are brought up in a community, within a community with a group of people, you get to understand their plights and their obstacles and the opposition that comes against them. And so that's my story. But furthermore, I reach out to people that are watching, especially people of color. What happens to the black community is a trickle-down effect to you. And, you know, people say, you know, they love to quote a Martin thing that says, you know, an injustice to one, you know, is an injustice to everyone. But it really, really is true. And what you don't intervene on that level, like he goes by the last name with Muhammad. My family, Muhammad. These are ties that are intertwined to me. There's a connection there, a connection that I feel more than I feel with Becky. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, you know? And so what I'm trying to say is that for me, it trickles down, and what you allow and what you don't speak on, and it trickles down to you in some shape, form, or fashion. And that's for people of color. And beyond people of color, I wanted you to the community to see, even if you're not a person of color, if you see people that I have on the show constantly coming and talking about the challenges that they're facing, and you kind of turn a blind eye to that, I don't know. I wonder about the state of your soul. Oh, that was pretty deep. That was actually extra. But I really do. So those of you who are watching, I just urge you to stay involved, be involved, hear the voices that are here. I try my best not to offer solutions, but to give platforms for the voices to come up with solutions and kind of, you know, ask the questions to get the answers, because I do care about this community greatly. And so, you know, some ideas were put out there, and if, you know, you're out there watching and you'd like to link up with these, you know, faces and beings that are putting in work and have these ideas, please feel free to contact them. And I know through this great pain, I see something beautiful taking place, is the unity manifesting, that people that normally wouldn't congregate together are congregating together. And that's exactly what Meeting of the Mind seeks to do. Meeting of the Minds, if you notice, like, it will have a person from the Nation of Islam, a Christian, an atheist, and it is designed to show you that you can have a conversation and not agree, but walk in unity and find commonality and find areas where you can find common ground. And that's what this whole show, well, that's part of what this show about. The other part of it is to examine where people of color are in this country, especially when it comes to the Austin community. So this was a very intense and very serious topic. I thank all of you for being here. And yeah, so I guess we will continue to do play our positions in our stations and push for that unity and play the roles that we're intended to play, right? And so, anyone want to say closing things? I feel you wanting to say something, so please go ahead.
Just one thing. Me and Benjamin were talking earlier, and usually when we have a tragedy, you know, we gather together and we have this cathartic release and we set goals, and you know, let's continue to do that, but let's also follow through, and let's also acknowledge that there are things going on right now. You know, there are activities that are going on right now where we can be involved. The 10,000 Strong There's lots of organizations, lots of stuff that's happening. So just encouraging you guys to look at the stuff that's already been going on in town and come out and support those things. So
Absolutely. I want to add on with that. That's from that same conversation, that I don't want people to lose sight of or undervalue the community efforts that are being done every single day. That when a disaster happens, we do have to come together reactionary. But on the proactive side, we have meetings like I went to one of the 10,000 Fearless events. I know about the hotline, so I know I have that resource. I go to a black archery event 2 Sundays a month, so I have that black community there. I've been to City Hall when we're fighting for our rights and for equality. I've been to immigration rights rallies. And whether you're uniting at a community dinner, or you're at a mosque or a synagogue or a church or a park or a happy hour, every single day there is community being built in this city. But I think we need to be more intentional with it.
And on that note, I think it's important that we start getting outside again. The whole peeking through the windows really touched me, because it's true. At some point, people, parents start saying, you can't go outside, it's too dangerous, or whatever the case may be. But it speaks volumes when communities begin interacting on that level. So, just from a social standpoint, I do think it's important for us to start getting outside again, and not just wait for one night of the year, night out and all that, organized. We don't need that. Just get your kids outside, wash the car, water the grass, and talk to your neighbors, because community is much more than, rallies and reactionary events. This is about making sure that we know who's coming and going, and more importantly, just making sure that for those of us who are not in a position, whether they just don't have family members that are nearby, the elders in our community definitely need more support, and they need to know that we are there for them as well.
Everyone gave a closing remark. Did you like to add anything?
Well, yeah, sometimes we get the misconception of what unity actually looks like. Sometimes we think uniformity is unity. For instance, if we all came in here and we had on a Black Panther shirt, had the same haircut, had glasses on, whatever, but we disagreed with everything and vowed to, when we left this table, not to work together, then although we're uniform, we're not united. But all of us are sitting at this table. You have a Black Panther shirt on. You have a V-neck on. Your hair is different from my hair. His hair is different from her hair. We're different hues. We come from different walks of life. But everything that we're talking about today is in the same, under the same umbrella of uniting under a certain concept and working for the common good of our communities. And so that's the example of unity. So we don't have to look the same. We don't have to wear the same faith or practice the faith the same. We don't have to all be educated alike. We don't all have to come from the same areas of human endeavor. But if we agree on something and can put our mind, our muscle, and our resources toward accomplishing that goal, that's what unity looks like. So that's what I'm interested in, and that's what we're interested in. And I think through that, we'll find many of the answers that we're looking for.
Well, there's not much left that needs to be said. Just one final statement is that do not be afraid. I know that people are afraid and there's a lot of fear in the community, but I want you to look at the faces around this table that put their names and their faces out there. They walk into the fire because they are the fire. And so they're not afraid, and I hope that that gives you cause to not be afraid as you are miscellaneous or you're not known. The people at this table are willing to come and speak on these issues with no fear at all. And somehow I hope that gives you courage. And so we are sending you love and light, and until we see you next time, thank you for watching Meeting of the Minds.
Intellectually engaging to think outside the lines, with conversation about the nation that never leaves you blind. Take a listen and pay attention. Here is where you find the educational, sensational meeting of the minds. Yeah, it's the meeting of the minds. Meeting of the minds.